At the edge of the courtyard steps stood three figures. On the right, hands folded serenely within his sleeves, stood Lan Qiren. His expression was gentle, composed, yet there was the faintest curve to his lips, the sort of smile that suggested diplomacy and dangerous amusement. On the other side stood Jiancheng, arms crossed tightly, brows already drawn together in a glare that clearly communicated he had walked into something he had not consented to witnessing. And at the center, rigid, unmoving, beard immaculate, gaze sharp enough to slice through granite, stood Lan Qiren. The juniors dropped to their knees so fast the impact echoed sharply against the stone. "We were mistaken," one blurted at once. "We saw nothing," another added in panic. "There was no kissing," someone else cried far too loudly. The words hung in the air, irrecoverable. The denials overlapped in a frantic chorus of damage control, each attempt somehow making the situation even worse than before. Lan Jingyi, in a moment that would never be forgiven, attempted to fix it. It was metaphorical. Jinling elbowed him with enough force to qualify as an attack. Lan Qiren's gaze moved across the kneeling disciples, slow and deliberate, like a blade being drawn inch by inch. "Metaphorical," he repeated. The word did not sound like a question. It sounded like a charge. Lan Qiren inclined his head slightly, his expression calm, composed. "May we inquire?" he asked gently. "What this discussion concerns?" His tone was mild, too mild. The unfortunate junior who had started the entire disaster felt a wave of dread crash over him. In that moment, he wished with every fiber of his being that the earth should simply split open and swallow him whole. He tried to speak, stumbling over his words as he desperately attempted to explain himself. Sect leader, I only meant..." "You meant?" Jianqing cut in sharply, irritation sharpening every word. "To shout about kissing in the middle of a cultivation sect?" The glare he fixed upon the trembling disciple was fierce enough to make even a hardened corpse think twice. The boy swallowed hard, loud enough to be heard. "I saw them on the main path," he managed weakly. Lan Qiren's brows shifted, just slightly. "Whom did you see?" he asked slowly, each syllable precise. No one breathed. For a brief and desperate moment, Lan Jingyi seriously considered fainting on the spot. Seemed like a respectable strategy under the circumstances. Lan Shizui bowed even lower, attempting to salvage what little dignity remained of the situation. "We were speaking carelessly. It was inappropriate." "That is evident," Lan Qiren replied, iron threaded through every word. The explanations continued to tumble out in hurried fragments, yet each word seemed to dig the hole deeper rather than help them climb out of it. "We were speculating. We meant no disrespect." Lan Jingyi opened his mouth, clearly preparing to say something that would almost certainly make the situation worse. He closed it again just as quickly when Jinling stepped firmly on his foot. The message was clear: silence or perish. Lan Qiren's smile remained perfectly composed, yet there was unmistakable understanding in his eyes now, as though the pieces of the situation had quietly fallen into place. "I assume," he said smoothly, "that this speculation concerns Wangji and Wei Wuxian." It almost seemed as though Lan Qiren had awakened that morning and chose chaos. Several juniors made strangled, panicked noises that managed to confirm everything far more effectively than any clear answer could have. Jiancheng's irritation sharpened visibly. his glare turning colder and far more dangerous as he looked over the group of disciples. It was the kind of look that suggested patience had already run out several moments ago. Lan Qiren closed his eyes briefly, as though steadying himself against the sheer absurdity of the situation. When he opened them again, his silence had only deepened, heavy and ominous over the courtyard. Public displays of affection. On the main path, in broad daylight, within cloud recesses, each thought seemed to land like a blow against centuries of unspoken rules, rules that now felt as fragile as paper caught in a storm. Yet the problem lay not in the offense itself, but in what could be done about it. What could he say? Lan Wangji was not a reckless junior who could be summoned and disciplined, and Wei Wuxian was not an outsider who could simply be expelled. They lived together now. They were bound by devotion. And perhaps, most frustrating of all, they stood firmly within the bounds of something that could not be forbidden. Lan Qiren drew in a slow, measured breath. Idle minds produce idle speech, he said at last, his voice controlled but edged with steel. The juniors bowed at once, foreheads nearly touching the cold stone. You have training to complete. Jiancheng snapped, his patience clearly worn thin. Or has Cloud Recesses abandoned discipline entirely? No, they answered in terrified unison. Then why? Lan Qiren continued, each word measured. You gathered here discussing such matters? No one spoke. No one even dared to breathe too loudly. Lan Qiren stepped forward just slightly, his tone smooth, calm, offering a way out. Return to your training, he said, his tone smooth, carrying quiet authority. Let us not lose focus over speculation. It was not a command shouted. It was mercy, a clear lifeline thrown into the middle of their collective disaster. The juniors seized it instantly, voices rising together as they hurriedly acknowledged the instruction. Yes, sect leader, they cried. Lan Jingyi did not lift his head. Beside him, Jinling looked as though he would much rather face 10 fierce corpses in a battle than endure another moment of this. Lan Shizui meanwhile remained perfectly still, maintaining admirable composure, though the faint redness creeping along the tips of his ears betrayed him completely. The moment lingered only a second longer, and then the juniors scattered back to their training. Lan Qiren cast one final look over the scattering disciples, his gaze passing across them sharp with deliberate weight. Within seconds, the scandal-ridden courtyard transformed into a battlefield of frantic practice. Swords flashed through the air with sudden, desperate precision as the juniors performed their forms with a level of dedication that had never before been witnessed within cloud recesses. Lan Qiren watched the spectacle for a moment, his expression calm as ever, before turning a quiet glance toward Jiangcheng beside him. Jiancheng did not look back. Unbelievable, he muttered under his breath, irritation lingering even as the situation passed. Lan Qiren said nothing. He simply closed his eyes for a brief moment. Behind that composed silence, his mind moved quickly, precisely, searching for order where disorder had been suggested. Wangji would not. No, Wangji would not initiate impropriety. He was disciplined, reserved, principled. Every moment of his life had been shaped by restraint and clarity of conduct. The very thought of him behaving carelessly in public strained belief. If such behavior had occurred, then the conclusion was obvious. It was influence. It was corruption. It was Wei Wuxian. Of course it was. Even if Wangji had leaned first, even if Wangji himself had chosen the moment, Lan Qiren refused to accept that it could have arisen from nowhere. No, if such a thing had happened, It would be because that boy had unravelled him thread by thread, until even Lan Wangji's iron discipline had begun to loosen. That, at least, was the only explanation that made sense to him. Lan Qiren did not turn his gaze toward the Jingxi, but his thoughts went there all the same, unruly, incorrigible. Even after all these years, he had tolerated it, he had endured it, and against every instinct he possessed, he had even accepted it. But this, public, on the main path, Lan Qiren's grip tightened almost imperceptibly around the staff in his hand. And at the exact moment, outside the Jingxi, two figures stepped out at last, having only just finished dressing. Wei Wuxian paused mid-sentence. Huh? His nose wrinkled slightly, and he sneezed. Once, then again. Beside him, Lan Wangji turned at once, attention sharpening. Cold? He asked quietly. Wei Wuxian blinked, still recovering. No. But suddenly I feel like someone is scolding me very intensely. Lan Wangji's gaze shifted, only slightly, barely noticeable toward the lower courtyard. Wei Wuxian narrowed his eyes at him, suspicion settling in immediately. What? He asked. I didn't do anything today. Lan Wangji did not answer. The silence that followed was not empty. The air in cloud recesses felt altered, as though something unseen had been stilled, something old, something rigid, unsettled by a disruption it could not yet correct. And somewhere behind it all, watching without interference, Lan Qiren stood. His expression remained composed, serene as ever, but slowly, very slowly, a knowing smile returned.